What's up, YouTube, and welcome to the MC's Unscripted, where we talk to artists, entertainers, and behind-the-scenes decision-makers who are some of the best at what they do. My name is Bruce Lively, aka The Core, and our guest today is the epitome of that intro. Okay, listen, artist, check. Entertainer, check. Behind-the-scenes decision-maker? Well, let's see. He's the top American executive of one of the most important independent record labels, in my opinion, in the past 30 years or so. So I'd say check on that. Yeah. But what about author? What about record store owner? And quite frankly, most importantly, a son, a brother, and a husband. I plan on getting into every single one of these topics. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Nabil Ayers.
Thanks, Doug. It's quite an intro. It's really nice to be here. Nice to talk to you on screen for the first time.
Yes. We had an awesome phone conversation, and I've been excited for this. And as usual, no matter how many plans I make and how much research I do, something comes up that changes everything. And one of those things is there was a hurricane that just passed over you last night. Are you guys okay? How are you doing? What's going on? Where are you, by the way? Let them know.
Yeah, I'm in Palm Springs. My wife and I live in Brooklyn, but we spent some time out in Palm Springs and came out right before this hurricane was going to hit. So we knew about it, but we came anyway and just kind of hunkered down. But we got lucky and everything's okay. It's nice and sunny now.
Yeah, it looks sunny. It looks like you have your electricity, internet and stuff. That is awesome. So did you feel the earthquake? Because I'm hearing like there was an earthquake before the hurricane.
Right, we didn't. I got all these texts that are like, are you guys okay in the hurricane? And then got earthquake texts. And it's like, what's going on? I didn't feel it at all.
You guys got lucky. Oh, that's so...
the end of the world every day.
My God, that's so good. And it really is. You've done so much. That intro was not hyperbole. And it wasn't just me being energetic, although I had to redo it twice. Sure. Right? But the truth is in the words, and I meant every word of it. And with all the things you do, we want to educate people on that. We want to have you answer these questions in a way that will help some of those that watch this type of channel and watch this channel specifically. I know who you guys are. Just to get more knowledge, just to get the things they haven't learned in their music ed class.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is you played the drums.
I think you're right. That is the most important thing.
And I played the drums.
I don't have any sticks right here. I got a pen.
I used to play with a pen. I used to play with pens. Listen.
That's what I did in class in school.
Exactly. But when music gets started, it's whatever straight object you can use becomes a stick. So I want to talk some drums with you, man. How long have you been playing? And not just, touching it, but playing.
Right. I mean, really, literally as far back as I can remember. When I was 2.5 years old, my uncle, my mother's younger brother, bought me a drum set, a real drum set. I mean, it was janky and everything, but it wasn't like a kid-size kit. It was like a proper, like orange and silver splotched Ludwig kit, and it was amazing. I was 2.5. I mean, the floor tom stood higher than I did.
Wow.
And he did that because I was already just like one of those kids who was banging on everything in the house, playing pots and pans, and music was always on. I grew up with my mother. Music was on all the time. So that was just, I think he just saw it as like, oh, this kid plays drums, so let's get him some drums. And then pretty early, I mean, I have recordings still of me when I'm 3-4 years old playing drums with my uncle who plays saxophone, and you can hear me talking and bossing him around between songs, and we're playing like the Sesame Street theme and the Rocky theme and some great 70s jams. And just, so always played my entire life. Finally, once I was in high school, was able to sort of try to start bands, play punk bands and rock bands, and same thing in college. And then finally, when I was 22 or 23, I lived in Seattle at the time. This was the early 90s. That's when I got in what I call my first real band, because I got a record deal and played in real venues and went on tours and did all that stuff. And did that for a long time, from pretty much like age 22, 23 till about 36, about 15 years of real doing it.
Is that the Lemons?
Yeah, not that
First
whole
band?
time. I was in several different bands, but the Lemons was the first band. Yeah, Seattle rock band.
Okay. Um, yeah, we got to talk about that. We got to talk about it. So, I'm going to play some clips. We're gonna play some drums.
Surprise.
Yeah, I told you before that I only have 2 hours with you, and YouTube. I'm going to put timestamps in here for you, because if you think I'm gonna have a drummer for the first time on my show and we're not gonna talk about it, you don't know where you're at, and so you can just skip over it. But be assured, we're talking drums, okay? Yeah. So number one, did you actually have any formal training? Now, you guys should know that Nabil is of a musical family, and if you haven't figured out the last name yet, that's coming. You should know. But anyway, more so than that, just from reading your book, I've noticed just your family is full of artists and musicians, and I'm sure that they taught you a lot. So by formal education, I mean in college, band class in school, marching, stuff like that.
Never any. And I think what happened is, my uncle gave me a drum set when I was 2.5, so I just started playing along with records. I was, I think, probably too young to actually have lessons. So I just listened to a lot of music, and I would put on headphones or not put on headphones, just put on a record and play along, or try to play along. And by the time I was 5, I could, play along to whatever, my Stevie Wonder records and my Kiss records and all that stuff. So I pretty self-taught, and learned to play by playing along with my favorite bands. And then I probably, when I was maybe 10 or 11, tried to start taking lessons and was really not good at it. I didn't want to practice. I loved playing, but I didn't want to sit there and do rudiments and paradiddles. And I felt like, well, I already know enough that why would I do that? And part of me wishes I had, but I don't know. I mean, I never learned to read music, and that never really hurt me as a rock drummer. I never found myself in a situation where that was a disadvantage. But I had a great teacher who I think pretty quickly realized, okay, he's not going to practice. So what my drum lessons became were just like him turning me on to tons of music I didn't know. And at first kind of watching me figure things out, and then him finding really hard things and both of us figuring out together, and me showing him something. It turned into more like he was really great at adapting to, I think, what I wanted to do, which really helped. So never got, I definitely can't do a good, like, whatever, 7-stroke roll, if that's even a thing.
It's a thing.
But I can play along with a Kiss record.
Awesome. Okay. So the idea that you need to learn to read music is well overrated, right? Especially amongst people who are people like me, are music educators.
Right, okay.
Your style of playing, your interpretation of the music may now, I think, come from that idea that you're not really trying to do anything percussive. You're just playing the music that you hear. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I always thought as a drummer, I was never a super flashy drummer. I never have been. I'm very much like, my job is to try to make the song better. It's not to show off or to be the star of the song. It's to make the whole thing a stronger thing.
Exactly. And it shows, and it's awesome, but in your style of music with like the Long Winters, okay? This singer, he gives me that sunny day real estate type of vibe, right? And the music is somewhere in between this post pop or student, why do you dream of me when you dream of your acre of trees?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. There's an interesting story about this.
It was agreed I came to burn leaves. It's all I ever claimed to do. A plowman I'll never grow into. My arms miss you, my hands miss you. Start singing, I've got this song in my head. Let's stop here. During the verse, what do we have? We've got floor tom, doom, doom, chop, chop, doom. Hi-hat accents, doom, doom, doom. And it's all looped. Give me the writing process for that.
So the crazy thing about that song, there's an earlier version of that song that John, I think that got released. There's definitely an earlier version that John recorded himself. It's a very acoustic solo, like singer-songwriter sounding version. And he said,
Student, why do you dream of me when you dream of your acre tree? It was agreed I came to burn leaves, it's all I claim.
he said, I want to do a rock version on this album. So we played it. That's the only song, though, on that album. For some reason, for fun, what we did, and I wonder what you think of it now, we tracked my drum tracks twice. Once was literally just the drums. The cymbals are a separate overdub track.
Oh, wow.
So I was playing with not hitting any cymbal, like, and then it was really weird and really hard to do both times. It felt totally unnatural. But there's something, John, I think the singer, actually produced that album with the engineer, this guy Floyd. The two of them, for some reason, thought that would be a cool idea, and so I don't know if you can tell. I don't know if you would have guessed that, but they sound, to me, it sounds really weird. They sound really separate and sort of, I don't know what the word is, but they sound really weird to me. But I like that drum track a lot.
There's the part of this when you, every time you stop on that hi-hat, it's super crisp. That might be what it is.
Right, because there's no bleed, there's no drum bleed into the hi-hat mics, because there's into the cymbal mics, because there's no drums happening when the cymbals are recorded, and vice versa. So everything's really dry.
And that is exactly what happens. It gets super dry, and there's so many parts to the loop that there's never a time for the ear to go, okay, I got the groove. It's always a big part of it. It's as much as of the music as the guitars or the bass, right? And I love that about this type of kind of underground, grungy
indie rock
yeah. music. So let's take a look at the other one. This is it here.
I know I wasn't made to play on a team. You weighed your suitcase down, but it still didn't sink. I know that crime doesn't pay, but I don't know any other way.
Exactly.
So,
and that's the fun thing about being a drummer, is like playing those songs live. Like you could sit there, and I could sit there and watch people move differently in different parts of a song. That part of the song, you could watch people like dance more. Not, I mean, it wasn't the kind of band where people like actually danced, but like move differently than they did in like the song that you played before.
Well, that's interesting, because those beats are very dance driving. Like they're not. So music has in most ideas, music has a few functions. One is dancing, right? And one is ceremonial function. One is mental stimulation. So like Tool is mental stimulation, right? Like you're not dancing to that. It's not for a ceremony. Your drumming style takes something that I think is a lot of times meant to be mental stimulation, right? Type of music, and dances it. And I just wanted to say, like, I was just wondering, the writing that you're doing on these drums are just, they're so tasty, and they're so danceable. You know when to throw stuff in, you know when to lay it back. And is there, especially like turning that chorus into just dance?
Right.
Is there a decision made there by you, or is it by the whole band? How did it come about?
Imagine, it was so long ago. I think I pretty much wrote most of my parts, but there are definitely times when mostly John, the singer who wrote the music, would say like, "No, make that more of like a double time thing," and do like he knew what he wanted it to feel like. So he definitely had input, but I feel like most of it started with me, and then either stayed that way or went to a different direction if he asked for it. What's interesting, I didn't really think about this till now, but I mean, growing up, I listened to so many different drummers. Of course, as a kid, I was into like Neil Peart from Rush and Stuart Copeland and like the real technical guys, because that's what everyone did who was a drummer. But I was really into Tony Thompson. who played, I still am, who played, in Chic, and like was a big studio drummer. He's on David Bowie Let's Dance. He's on the Power Station record. He's on Madonna Like a Virgin, which is a secret killer drum album. Or maybe is it Like a Virgin? It is, yeah. And he has such a distinct style that to me is like pretty bombastic, but still really simple and super straight, I would say, and really groovy. And like there's this big hi-hat thing that he often does, the like sort of like it's like his signature thing. And and a lot, I wish I played like Tony Thompson, but a lot of the way you're describing my playing reminds me of how I would describe his. So I'm using it as a compliment.
Very much so a compliment. That's very much so a compliment. Well, understanding the writing decisions is something that you may or may not be able to explain. But how it sounds, that's the compliment. It's great stuff, man. It really is great stuff. And playing to it, trying to sit down and play to it, has kind of opened up some of my creative dreams.
Oh, that's cool. Wow. Fun.
Yeah, man. So I love it. All right. So, man, thank you for nerding out with me.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't expecting this. That was really fun.
Everybody on YouTube, don't forget, the rudiments only help you do what you feel. But if you can't feel it, the rudiments don't help. And I think that that's something that we always have to remember. And we always have to, when we approach music, people, playing for mental stimulation is good. Oh,
yeah.
But playing the music first is always going to be better.
Yeah.
Always going to be better.
One of my favorite drum albums that I always think about is Back in Black, which I don't know if there's a straighter drum record. Even just that song, that riff, surely you have it in your head once I just say it, but it's just...
Yeah. Boom, doo boom, doo boom.
I mean, it's so straight and so simple and feels so good. And there are people who are like, can play rudiments all day long, do crazy fills and everything. But can you do that? Because that feels better in the end. Right. That's what you want. That's what moves the asses,
Okay, so I was going to make that the last part of this, but since you want to bring it back, that's not an issue for me. Listen, so that is usually one of the very first songs I'm teaching. Every kid comes up, we're like, okay, we got Back in Black, we got The Reason by Uberstank. Can you play? Yes, right? Can you do?
But all of those are like the simple parts, but they're the filthiest groove with so much feel and so much like style hidden in there.
What we learn is through almost most of our 6 months of first practicing, the first thing I'm teaching them is you're not hitting the bass drum exactly when he hits the bass drum. Yeah, you're playing an 8th note rock groove. I feel you, brother. You're not playing that snare exactly where he put that snare.
Yeah, that like slight lag, that like...
Right? Was it a little before? Was it a little after? Right. How loud was his hi-hats?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Not as loud as any new drummers.
Exactly. And so we spend so much time understanding that groove has less to do with a paradiddle and more to do with your control of where this lands in the parking space, in the grid, right? And there's drummers who cannot do anything but that. And I go back to the White Stripes drummer, and her name keeps...
Meg White, yeah. Meg White. I've spent years defending her. I think if there had been a technically better drummer in that band, the band wouldn't have been as good. She's what made it work.
She's what made the band work. I don't know if anybody understands this, but Jack White is actually off tune most of the time.
Which is also cool.
And if it wasn't for the fact that his drummer is keeping everything in line, you might go say to yourself, I don't know if I can handle more than 3 minutes of this.
Right. And Nirvana was another great example of that, where Kurt, incredible voice, incredible songwriter, obviously had a way to connect with people, but technically not a great guitar player in the way that, not a Guitar Center guy.
No. But great.
But Dave Grohl.
But Dave Grohl. And we're going to stop there because we don't say the hallowed name of Dave Grohl without being able to show extensive examples of his music and writing, and so I'm done. I'm just playing. So, all right. So that was awesome, man. Excellent. But you did say something else, and you talked about your uncle. And there's the other part of this interview I really wanted to get into. More so than anything else, I'm sure that people find a lot of ways to find you, right? Like I said, executive. Also, you are the son of Roy Ayers. If people didn't know, here's the reveal. But it was in a very different way. And I don't think anybody would have known this story, this amazing story, if it weren't for your book, My Life in the Sunshine.
Yeah.
And in that book, you talk about those uncles, you talk about your stepfather, and all of these people who made music around you. And I found it extremely, extremely, I don't know what you call that, if it's kind of like destiny, right? Like this weird show of the universe that no matter what your mom thought was going on, or Roy thought was going on for that matter, you were going to end up being in music. Can you just talk about how does that feel, seeing that, writing that? Because I hear you talk about writing that in another interview and how it kind of sunk in after you wrote it.
Yeah, I mean, sort of, I guess there's a lot there, but really the music thing to me, I started just, like I said, playing drums when I was 2, kind of taught myself to play guitar the same way when I was maybe in junior high school. So I play guitar and bass just more for fun on the side. Always played music, but also always, even in junior high, even younger than junior high school, was like, get 2 friends together, learn 3 songs, let's put on a concert. We got to make posters. We got to put them up at the laundromat. We got to sell tickets. We're splitting the money. Like I somehow, all that was really interesting. That was like baked in. Like I understood there's a business part of this too. And I also really loved it and found it fascinating. I liked it as much as the playing part. So that worked really well as a kid. And then in high school, my shitty punk band would like record 3 songs on a cassette recorder. And I was the one that was like, great, now we're going to Kinko's. We're going to make 10 copies of covers. We're going to dub cassettes tonight. And tomorrow we're going to sell these at school for $5 each. Like I always knew, like, you don't just do it, you do it. And then you try to get it out in the world and you tell people about it. Like,
okay, so that is where I felt in reading the book. I'm like, this dude is a kindred spirit. That was me. I remember my first high school band. We all put money together because I was like, hey, we should all put money together. And I'm going to be working, by the way, while I'm like my first year of high school. And when everybody's out for the summer, and everybody else should find something to do so we can put money together so we can go to the studio. Then we go to the studio. It's like, hey, by the way, we need to make these tapes. Oh, by the way, we need to be selling them.
Never ends.
Right? And I was always that guy. And I find that a lot of times the drummer is that guy.
Wow, that's true.
That could be anecdotal. I don't know. But,
yeah. But it's interesting to me that, like, so now, I still play music for fun, but I'm not a professional musician. I haven't toured and like since that Long Winters tour, probably 15 years ago. But, so a lot of people are like, so then you made this pivot into the industry. And to me, it's like, no, it wasn't a pivot. It was always there. I just started to focus on that more. But, really even, I started, I did college radio in college, like a lot of people do. And then my first job out of college wasn't a real job. It was a job at a record store because I wanted to work in music. And that was a way in. And that was a way to be around people who made music and sold music. And, I learned so much. And then I opened my own record store. And so all of this, having my own record store, allowed me to be in a band and go on tour and leave for 6 weeks and come back and not lose my job. So it was always this balance of the music and the business. And to me, it was just one thing. It was all just music and all these different ways that it could kind of manifest itself. And in a very similar way, that's what the book is. Even though it's not technically musical, it still feels very much like I figured out a way to do something creative that I love and then to get it out to the world. And now I'm going on book tours and I'm speaking and I'm selling the book. It's all the same thing. I've only done one thing my whole life. It's this. It just looks different on different days.
Talk about in the book, you actually mentioned like you on purpose decided that you weren't going to get a job that wasn't forcing you to do that. That decision to say, I'm jumping off the porch, like it's this or nothing. And if I even have a chance to get a job that'll get too much money, I'm turning it away. How hard is that decision? How concrete, well, I guess we can see, was that decision? And how was that decision explained to other people when they asked you, are you crazy?
That's a good question. I mean, I talk about this a lot because now I do a lot of talks at summer universities. So I always get into this because it's kids in college who are, graduating and want to get into something. And my advice is usually like, if you want to like get a job and have a job, that's great. Do that. But if you don't want that, just be careful starting that, because if you start that, it's going to be really hard to stop that. Meaning that I understood when I went to a pretty fancy liberal arts college called the University of Puget Sound outside of Seattle. My mom got loans and family help pay, and I was really fortunate to get through. And when I got done in 1993 in Seattle, it was not a hard time to get a job. The economy was good. Every one of my friends who wanted to get a job got like a business job and like, moved into a nice apartment. They weren't rich, but like starting their careers. And I knew that if I did that, in my head, I was like, well, how would I join a band and go on tour if I do that? That's not going to work. So I can't do that. So after college, I moved into a house that was less nice than the college houses I lived in, with 4 roommates, this dump in West Seattle. We each paid $154 a month rent. 2 bands practiced in the basement. And I worked at the record store down the street for $8 an hour, and it was great. It was really amazing. And that's where everything came from. That's how I met not only the people in the band that I ended up in that got signed, but also all these different people from record labels and distributors and everything. A lot of those people I still know and work with today. So it was, I didn't really have to explain it because my rent was so cheap that I was able to support myself. So I wasn't going into debt while I was doing this. I think that was the big thing. But, and my mother was really supportive at the time. And I think I just knew like, this is going to lead to what I want. So that it almost wasn't even a decision. Like, this is the opportunity and it's here. I'm going to go work in a record store. What's better than that?
Awesome. My father once told me when I guess we're talking about girls, he's like, you're not going to find a girl where you're not. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're in the club, you'll find a club girl. And if you're in the church, you find a church girl, right? Like, where you are, if you want a girl who's working and about some business, you better be working and about some business type of thing.
Makes sense. I wasn't going to find my band working in an insurance company.
Right. You're not going to find the band and a label to sign you and the connections you need and the practice space and a drum set and a guitarist and a writer at Kinko's, unless you go there to copy the cover.
Right, to copy flyers.
So that intention has to be there. It doesn't mean you have to be broke, but it means you have to have that intention. I like that. And you can find ways to work. Like you said, you found the record store or the thing adjacent to what it is you want.
Right, because my rent was cheap. It was only $8 an hour, but then there wasn't really anything else to spend money on because I got to go to so many shows for free. I got records for free or cheap. I got to go to lots of like parties and things where there were free drinks. So that's everything. That's all I would have spent money on. So that was it.
So you are in college, you're or after college even. There's a few stories I want to get into about that. Who was it with? In the book, you talk about you were with, are these the same roommates who got caught up into some let's say some pharmacy off non-shelf pharmaceutical?
Was the jail story?
Yes.
That was just pot.
No, I know.
Yeah.
It's just right now
a lot of pot.
So I want to talk about that. What is that like? What's your internal feeling when you can afford a lawyer to do this, or maybe because you're with people who look a different way, things might get off, and even maybe you yourself look a different way. Is there a guilt? Is there a conscious effort to let it go? Tell me.
Yeah, it's all that. I mean, the quick version of the story you're referring to. So my father's black, my mother's white. So I'm mixed, similar to your children.
Mm-hmm.
My name's Nabil, it's Middle Eastern. That often confuses people and maybe sends them down a different trail. And sometimes that's not a good trail, like, around the Gulf War or whatever, 9/11, things like that. So that's often in my head. But this story, it was 1995, so I was about 23 years old. My band, The Lemons, 3 white guys and me, were on tour, and just some of those guys like to smoke a lot of pot, and it was illegal everywhere then, so they brought a ton because it was a 6-week tour. So they brought 3.5 ounces. We hit a roadblock with like all these dogs and guys in fatigues and everything in the middle of the desert in Utah. The van got searched. They found it. They arrested us. I'm handcuffed on my knees in the desert. Felony possession with intent to distribute, like real 1995 scary war on drugs stuff. So that could have meant like real prison time, and we had it. We were guilty for all intents and purposes. So I remember being arrested and thinking like, what, am I going to get treated differently right now? Who do they think I am? Once they read the name on my ID, how's that going to change things? Are they going to think I'm Middle Eastern? Is that going to be better than maybe if they thought I was Black? Or are they gonna ask me? All these things are swirling through my head, and I have no way of knowing what was going through my bandmates' heads, but it wasn't that. And so that's just the kind of thing. It's just always there in any situation where I'm interacting with someone where something could go wrong, and oftentimes I sort of blame it on myself because I think I've spent a lot of time in my life over preparing for something to go wrong that doesn't actually go wrong. And sometimes I wish I hadn't used all that energy thinking those things when actually it was just fine. The thing I talk about in the book is in high school in Salt Lake City, Utah, very white town. When I went to like proms and dances in high school, would always go with white girls because that's who lives in Salt Lake City. Every time I went to pick up my date, different dates, I remember thinking like, as I walked up to the door, like, her mother is going to see me and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, she's sick," or her little brother is going to yell out, "Hey, he's Black," or something like that's going to happen. I thought that every time, and I kind of prepared for it, and it never happened. So the question I ask myself now is, should I have been wasting all that energy? I didn't need to. Nothing ever happened. Or was I smart to do that? And have I escaped many really scary situations that I don't even know about because it's always kind of in my brain? And I'll never know, but it's always there, and I'm always thinking about it.
Baldwin talks about this in his books all the time. The American, you realize this is a culture of you. You are as much part of this culture as anything, and you find that out when you go somewhere else.
Yeah.
You realize that it's only in America that you're more Black than American, or more of a color than American, and you realize that there is a shared culture here despite that. And then the duality of being Black or mixed, or wondering if are they going to not like me and maybe will they like me? And there's usually an internal conflict of privilege. Like, not only was I smart to think that, but did I get away from it because I have a lighter skinned privilege? My daughters deal with that. Do you deal with that?
Not so much these days in New York. I mean, I'm lucky I live in Brooklyn, where especially in my neighborhood, Clinton Hill, I see so many people of so many races and so many mixes. I can't even tell what's going on, which I love. Yeah. It reminds me of my childhood. So I don't spend much time thinking about it in my day-to-day life in New York. But I mean, I'm in Palm Springs right now. That's a different thing. And when I travel a lot. I've done so many book things, and sometimes, I mean, I drove, by myself from, trying to think, like, I drove like across Idaho through Washington by all those crazy white supremacist camps and stuff. Like, it was the whole time I was driving, I was like, don't get pulled over. Yeah. Also, don't, but also don't get in a situation where you need the police. Like, all these things, it's just like, it's scary to be non-white, I would say, in America.
So, so I live in Georgia, and it's constantly on the forefront. So I understand the difference because I lived in Chicago. That's where I grew up, and then moved to Georgia. And in Georgia, it's just different. I was talking to my wife the other day about how the Confederate flag was a part of the Georgia flag up until I was, 19. And it became a big thing to get rid of it. And she was like, "It was?" Like she never even noticed that it was there. because it's so pervasive. It's such a culture shock coming from anywhere up north or Midwest down to here, unless you were in a certain town in the Midwest, right? But kind of big city. So it's everyday life here, and they make sure that you know about it all the time. So
Really,
that is a big difference. Just to stay on this for just a second, there's another story in the book about the fraternities. Right. Let's talk about the Crips and Blood party.
all of that.
All of that.
I remember, so I went to this pretty fancy small college, like 3,000 students in Washington, and there's a pretty big fraternity and sorority system. I think there were 6 fraternities, 6 sororities, and about 40% of the students belonged to one. So it was big for how small the school was. And you couldn't join until you were halfway through your freshman year. So they wanted, for a small school, wanted everyone to kind of make friends and establish some things before you went on to the party life or whatever it was. So when I came back after my first Christmas break, I decided to go through Rush, which is the process of sort of you visit houses, you decide who you like, they decide if they like you, and that's how they choose every year the new membership. And I mean, talk about being worried about my name and what I look like and all those things. I mean, just the stereotypes of fraternities, many of which are true or many of which are based on things that definitely happened. In my head, it's like rich white kids who are all going to ask me what my father does for a living, what kind of car I drive, all these things. And I'm thinking, well, I'm going in here, the half Jewish, half black son of a single mother who grew up on welfare, with a weird name, all these things. Like, what am I doing? But I like this school. I like my friends. I'm going to try it. The worst thing that happens is it's like Animal House. Like, they make fun of me and kick me out or whatever. And amazingly, I really liked the process. I met a lot of cool people, joined a fraternity, had a great time, ended up learning a lot in it. And of course, there are tons of parties and tons of stupid shit, like the Crips and Bloods parties. Parties always have themes. And so this was the early 90s.
Right.
And one party, the theme was Crips and Bloods. And all these white kids came, wasn't blackface, but it was like, wearing the red and the blue bandanas and everything. And this is in Tacoma, Washington, which was a real gang city at the time. And so like, very close to where we were, right downtown, a mile or two away, there's actually real Crips and Bloods. There were shootings all the time. So I remember thinking like, I'm 19 or whatever, but still thinking like, this just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
But what was weird, and the fraternity I was in, Sigma Alpha Epsilon, it was founded by 8 guys who went on to be Confederate soldiers at the University of Alabama. I mean, it's wild. But my thing at the time was like, look, so I can either say, okay, that's not for me, or I can join it with my friends who I like. And at the time I was there are gay kids, there are other black kids, there are Indian kids, there are Jewish kids. So my thing was like, let's go in there and change this rather than just like saying, oh, that's not for us. That should just be what it is and stay that way forever. So I feel like I spent a few years doing that and making it better. And it was pretty fun. And I ended up being the president of the fraternity and really learned a lot. I'm still friends with some of those people. And it's something I have to defend every now and then, but it was a good time.
How do you think that has affected you, having to defend it? Compared to what I'm saying, like, has that given you a stronger vision on? Because it almost seems like in the book, you're still on the fence. You like it more than you didn't, but you're on the fence of it. Like when you mentioned the Black Student Union or other things like that. Where are you now with that?
I mean, yeah, the Black Student Union I mentioned what was weird is there was one at UPS. It's very small because there were very few black students, and they would call me every semester. And at the time, I remember thinking like, I'm not black enough. And these people, they're calling me because technically on my application, I'm black. So every semester someone would call and say, hey, come to one of the meetings, find out what it's about. And I never went because I was always scared that I would get there and they would be like, you're not black. What are you doing there? And this is all in my head. Again, this is to the code switching stuff we were talking about. And it was amazing to me that I could sit in the worst stereotypical thing in the world, the president of a fraternity founded by Confederate soldiers who thought that it was more diverse than the Black Student Union, because the Black Student Union was only black students, whereas the fraternity was actually a pretty big mix, maybe even more of a mix than the actual school itself. But in retrospect, I really wish I'd gone. But
that was my next question. Do you regret it?
Definitely. Yeah, it would have been so easy. I'm sure I would have made friends. I probably would have been glad. Yeah. And I think I was just scared.
And that's understandable.
And also scared that like I was, I grew up pretty detached from Black culture in Salt Lake City with a white mother before I went to college. So like I was listening to white rock bands. I finally got into Bad Brains and Living Color, and like a lot of I was so excited when those bands came out, but for the most part, so there was this part of me that's like, not only am I going to go there and they're going to think I'm weird, but like I'm not going to be able to relate. I'm not going to be able to talk about any of the same things that they're talking about. I'm here listening to Nirvana and Guns N' Roses.
Yeah. And I know what you mean. The first time I saw Bad Brains on the cover, right? What was it, like Bubbles or something like that? Don't blow no
Oh yeah,
bubbles.
Quickness. Is it on Quickness?
Quickness.
Yeah.
My cousin, who was like my muse, the guy who told me that, hey, it's okay to listen to rock. It's all right. Doesn't mean you're not black anymore. First of all, growing up in a Jamaican household is not growing up in a Black American household. And having to discuss that with people and letting them know that I don't think you understand, like, I don't know collard greens and ham hocks.
Like there are different kinds of black. Yeah.
There we go. Right. I don't know what your forefathers did. I know my forefathers were Maroons. Like I don't know. The whole thing is different, right? And even the racism is big. Like there's a lot of old school Jamaicans that are like, oh, Black Americans, they're just so, and it's disgusting, but it's just it shows you how the culture is different, right?
Yeah, it exists everywhere.
Right. So yeah, I grew up listening to whatever I wanted to and thinking that, it's okay until the first time I realized, oh yeah, I'm not white. And then actually seeing that Bad Brains cover and Living Color when my cousin brought it to me, Stevie, what's up, man? I cried. And I was like, okay, so I am kind of normal. I was also young and I was also a softie. I've been that way. But I was like, so I am normal. Right. So I found there is somewhere like where I can be okay. And that meant a lot to me.
Yeah, for me it was similar, but for me it was really like, because I talk about this in the book a bit, but like of course I didn't identify with the Beatles and with the very white rock bands that I saw when I was a kid, saw pictures of, but I also was like, oh, Stevie Wonder, Patti LaBelle, these people are much darker than I am. I'm also not like them. I don't know who I identify with. And then I got into all these white rock bands, and that was always great. But there was this part of me that was like, but I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do that. This is only like for white people with long hair, dudes, And then Bad Brains, Living Color, Fishbone, all these bands. So to me, it wasn't like I look just like them. It was, oh, there are lots of other people doing this now.
Yes.
And so the door is open. Things have changed. I'm going to figure out a way in. That's really what it said.
Your mother, did she try to introduce you to more people of color, or did she kind of do the we're colorblind thing?
Definitely didn't do that. No, didn't do the colorblind thing. I mean, I was born in New York City. We moved to Cambridge. We moved a lot when I was a kid. Cambridge, Massachusetts, Amherst, Massachusetts for 4 years, and then back to New York City. So that was my first 10 years. And during those 10 years, especially Amherst, it was so incredibly diverse. I know that's like a buzzword, but it was truly diverse, meaning like I had so many friends of different races, of different mixes, kids who had one parent, it was kids who had no money. Like I was totally a normal kid. And I had friends of every race. I had Black friends, but I had friends, Pakistani friends, and like really like interesting childhood in that way because of the places we live, which my mother put us in deliberately. So it's not at all that we were colorblind. It's more just like I really grew up around this very like everyone is equal thing. There weren't clusters of Black kids or clusters of white kids or clusters of Puerto Rican kids. They were just kids, and we all hung out together, and no one was better. And of course, we were different, but like it was a really unique, I think, idyllic way to grow up. And so then when we moved to Salt Lake City when I was 10, obviously all that changed, and everyone was kind of just white, and I was definitely like a weird kid for the first time. Mm-hmm. Kids asked if they could touch my afro, which I used to have. They asked about my name, they asked about my father, all these things that no one had ever asked me for 10 years, they started doing. But I mean, even in Salt Lake, I remember My mother was actually really good about it. Not specifically like we need to get you around some people of color, but more like we went to, cool things. There's a big Native American population in Salt Lake City. We'd go to those events. Like we'd go to more like cultural events and things that were just like as much as we could around more people. But it was pretty hard there in the 80s. You had to really, really try. So that's when I ended up really just kind of growing up with a bunch of white kids.
Yeah. Okay. And to stay here, your mom seems to be one of the most determined, well put together, and thought through. And the dichotomy of thought through, I know if anybody who's read the book, we're going to talk about that too, if it's all right. But in most ways, it seemed like ahead of the game, understanding exactly where you need to be, what she needed to do, who to see next, and how to make it happen. Having that, because it's obvious your pride in her shines through the book. And then there's this internal conflict. For those who don't know, Roy Ayers and your mother, say her name for me? Louise. Decided to have a child, and that he was not going to be involved with the raising of the child, and that was okay and agreed upon to begin with.
Yeah, and there wasn't even really a relationship up till that point. She met him, they'd hung out a few times, but it wasn't like they were dating, there was nothing. And then she said, I want to have your child, you don't need to be involved. And he said, okay.
Okay, so there's a conflict that happens there. The same mother that is everything that I just said also has this where you kind of noticed the idea was, maybe she was selfish for that, and all those kind of ideas. So without going through the whole book, I just found that and I think that's one of the cornerstones of the book. So if we're going to talk about it, give us a little bit of what that is, because I can't do it justice with me fumbling over these words. But
with my mother, who, she was young. She was 22 when she had me, 21 when she got pregnant, had no money, no life plan, no education, lived in New York City, and just knew that she wanted to be a young single mother and that she could do it. She was determined. And so she had me. My uncle, her younger brother, huge part of it, really my father figure. And we moved around a lot, largely chasing him. He went to Berklee School of Music in Boston, so we went there. He came back to New York, so we came back to New York. But, really, I think she kind of sacrificed her 20s and 30s, pretty important years, to raise me. That's what she was committed to doing. That's what she was there to do. And her whole life was about building our lives, but really building a better life for me. So she went to college, got her degree at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and we lived there, got her MBA, got this big corporate job at American Express that she hated, but did it to, make money and put me through school and put me through college, did all these things, bought me drums, bought me records, took me to concerts, snuck me backstage to meet my favorite bands, really just did everything to kind of turn me into the person I am.
When you were listening to the Pixies, who is, yes, everybody, who is a band on the label that he's an executive of, and we're getting to that next. But yes, when you're listening to that with her, she had this amazing mom sight, right? This insight into saying, from what I remember in the book, like she was like, if you like this, like she likes this too.
Like, oh yeah, she always liked everything that I.
Yeah, like oh, this is really good. So let's find out where they're playing.
Right. Son. Yeah, I think once I got old enough to start going to concerts alone, she was really disappointed because she wanted to go to see all my bands with me.
Oh man, so did she come and see you play at all?
Oh yeah, many times. Yeah.
In college?
Maybe not in college, but once I was in real bands, in the Lemons and the Long Winter, every one of those bands.
They're all real bands. You stopped that.
All real bands. Yeah, she's seen tons and tons of shows over the years.
Okay, so for the other part of this book, equally as important, your father, Roy Ayers. Um, in the introduction, I introduced you as a son and a brother. And the reason why those really stick out to me is the son of your mother, but the brother of Roy Ayers Jr., who is our talent buyer, my partner in this endeavor we call the MC's channel, was his husband. And he passed away a few short months ago. And in trying to interview Roy Ayers Sr., in learning about, just his family and being there for him and creating this memorial is actually how I found you.
Yeah.
Doing research for the interview with Roy, right? And so there are three things that I noticed in the book that you haven't had a chance to talk about yet, and because mainly you didn't know Roy Ayers Jr.
No, we never met.
Never met. Strong question, but I'm just curious. I want to know how that felt for you when you found out, when you finally met Shelton, his husband.
Yeah.
He tells me about these conversations. Can you talk about that a little bit for me?
Yeah, and what's interesting is I always knew that I had an older brother, Roy Ayers. I think Roy the third, actually. It was
Yes.
who was about 10 years older than me.
They always call him Junior, but he's the third.
Yeah, but he's the third. Yeah, about 10 years older than me. Obviously different mothers. And when I finally met my father, Roy, and asked him all the sort of family questions, he told me about his son, Roy, who lived in Australia at the time. This was, 15 years ago. And so that's kind of the last I heard from him or of him. And in my head, I was like, well, Australia, what am I going to do? I'll never meet him. And then once I started to connect with more family, some cousins in Los Angeles, some people in the last few years, some of the stuff's in the book. That's when I started to hear more about Roy the Third and that he was sick with some kind of disease that his mother also died of, and that he was in a hospital somewhere in New York where I live. And I remember thinking that I could go visit him or go show up and say hi, but I think there's this big block in my head because I tried with Roy has two other kids who are 2 and 4 years ish younger than me, and they've just never been responsive to me. That kind of side of the family, even though I had one great meeting with Roy, he's not in touch. No one in his family is in touch with me. They don't get back to me, and so I kind of stopped trying a long time ago. So in my head, I just thought that Roy the Third would be in that camp, and it takes a lot of energy and a lot of bad feelings to try to reach out to those people and have them not get back to you. So the easy self-protective thing to do was, oh, that's really too bad to hear about him. Oh well. And I'm now talking to Shelton, and so how this all happened, I'm trying to think. There's someone that I met who actually lives in the South. He lives in Alabama. Anyway, I met him because he's friends with Shelton, and he put me in touch with Shelton. I had lunch with him in somewhere in Alabama, and he's like, "Let's get Shelton on the phone right now," and put him on FaceTime, and we started talking. And so
because this is Shelton.
Yeah, so this is right when Roy had passed, and so Shelton and I ended up getting on the Zoom for a couple hours, I don't know, a month ago or something like that, and that's how he finally put us directly in touch. But talking to Shelton, and this is after my half brother had passed, he was really saying, you remind me so much of him. I really wish you guys could have met. It wouldn't have been like that. He's not like the other part of the family. I think he would have loved to meet you. And so that was really nice to hear, but also really sad because I think I was just really trying to be protective and not do anything to myself, but I wish I had.
Yeah. And I understand that. Awesome. Well, not awesome, but I understand it. And I say that, well, number one, he doesn't have 5 letters in his name. All right. So you found that out. And that's not an inside joke, guys. It's also in the book. I just want you to be able to read it too. I don't want to give it all to you.
Right.
But another 5-letter name that you found, Ebony. You say most of them don't really talk with you now. Does Ebony still? It seemed like you guys ended up on a really good relationship.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how much do we give away here? What do you want me to say?
No, it's up to you. It's up to you.
Yeah. I mean, Ebony, I got in touch with her somehow on Facebook 5, 6, 7 years ago. she also said she was Roy's daughter, born the same year I was. And we were like, whoa, this is crazy. And she was excited to meet me. And so that to me was the opposite of the other people in Roy's family. So I was like, wow, this is crazy. We're so much alike. We're both kind of outside, but we were the same age and we have this in common. So we met in Philadelphia soon after that, where she lived. Got to be really close to me. It was like, oh, cool. Wow, I have a sister now. This is amazing. Heard so many stories that she told me that were similar to the way that I like, she's like, I snuck backstage and tried to meet him once, like really things that I really like. For the first time, when I tell people stories about my father, they sort of give me this sad face. And I'm always like, oh, that's so weird. Why? I don't know why I'm getting the sad face. She was telling me stories and I was feeling the sad face. I was like, whoa, now I understand hearing someone else tell it, why people, like I really learned so much from just connecting with her, and we had so much in common. And a lot of how the book ends is it turns out she's not actually Roy's daughter. And the really important thing I got from this is that, well, we're still brother and sister. We still have all that stuff, all these things that helped me get through this time and learn so much about myself. And we agree, we're on the same page. So I just went to her 50th birthday party a few months ago. It was amazing. My mother is really good friends with her mother. They talk all the time. So it's that's what I've gotten out of it. That's so much more important than the biological part.
Absolutely, absolutely. What an amazing story. To be a brother, just like your mother chose to be a mother, you choose to be a brother.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Right? You choose to be a brother. You didn't have to. But that connection was as necessary to you as I'm sure it was to your mom, and you've nurtured it in the same way. Not as a child, but the nurturing. And I think that the biggest part, and we're going to move on to some of our music, because we do have people who need to learn some in and outs of the music, who want to, some of them are about to graduate, some of them, a lot of music education students tune in, and I like to give them something from a professional point of view that they can grasp onto and learn and take with them and go, man, I'm glad I watched that show. I'm going to be doing this from now on. But before we get there, I wanted to oh man, I did feel like I lost that. Now I feel like I lost it. Oh, I'm not gonna say. Okay, so before we get there, I wanted to just know, do you feel like it was your mom being an artist, your father being a percussionist, right? This was genetically dispositioned for you, like, to be the music person. Like, you're genetically engineered to be the awesome musician or whatever it was.
I mean, probably, right? My mother's a dancer who constantly had music on and bought me records. She did all the work. Her and my uncle, my father, DNA, but that's literally it. But that's a lot. But my mother and my uncle did all the hard work, took me to concerts, played music with me, introduced me to musicians. I mean, really over indexed. I mean, my mother would seriously like, oh, you want to meet this band? Let's go hang out by the stage door for 4 hours and see when they would show up. Like, really, everything.
Wow.
And so it's impossible to know, the nature versus nurture thing, but I do think I had it on every end. That's why it's all I've ever been into.
And lastly, after reading your book, the biggest portion of it becomes obvious. Another conflict, another internal, maybe external. This idea that, well, Roy didn't do anything wrong. He was asked, he said what it was, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
But still being absent. And the blame for that is a very sticky navigation for you. As much as you want to, how has that changed through writing the book? A lot of times that type of self-reflection brings you to a place that you weren't when you were writing it. Has it changed? Yeah. How has that changed or grown or diminished or flourished
It's done all that over the years. I mean, it really, I grew up and more than grew up. I mean, until I was about 35, truly wasn't angry with him, didn't think about him that much. Liked the music, and that was kind of that, and really always understood it. Thought I had a great upbringing, I had great positive male role models, I have a great life. I didn't need him. You know, and still would always have to explain to people, no, there wasn't a divorce. He didn't leave us. Like, people want to put their own stuff on me because they had whatever happened in their childhood,
But also,
but
to be fair,
it's not that.
it's also, to be fair, it's a very unique story. Like that,
It's super unique. So it's still always hard to explain to people.
Right.
And I think I get a lot of like, but why aren't you mad?
Right.
I used to get that. I'd be like, because I had a great life and he did what he said he'd do. But anyway, so I had this great meeting with him finally when I was about 35. It's all in the book, of course, but I said, you know, it's time to meet him. Maybe I want to know some family history. I want to know medical history. He's getting close to 70. If I want to ever know any of this, maybe this is the time. So I actually got a hold of him, had this wonderful lunch with him in Seattle where we really like connected. It was like watching how we laughed and his mannerisms. It was crazy and intense and really fun. And to me, I thought like, wow, this is cool. Let's do this, you know, once a year when I'm in New York, a year in Seattle. Like, I'm 35. I'm not asking you for money. I'm not asking for anything except maybe just like a little more of this once or twice a year. And so to me, I was like, wow, this is great. Let's do this again. And then that's when I went to New York a lot back then in bands. I would always call, and he would kind of blow me off or be like, what, who's this? Or not answer. And it just started to feel bad. And after 4 or 5 of those things, I started to realize, okay, I don't think he actually wants to do this again. I think that was my one shot. And so that's finally in my 30s when I finally did start to feel angry at him. I was like, you know, why now when you got off so easy and I don't want anything? You got away with it. It worked. That might not have been easy for anyone in your situation to do, but here we are. And so that's when I started to get angry with him. And what's interesting is, to me, and this is what came out in the book, is how his music is a parallel for how I feel about him. So in the beginning of the book, the introduction, it's 2015, and I'm definitely not happy with him then. And I'm watching the movie Straight Outta Compton. And the first scene is Everybody Loves the Sunshine. It's Dr. Dre listening to it as a teenager. And I was so surprised by it. And I was just like, ugh. And I was alone in this movie theater in Los Angeles. And I felt like, whoa, is there a spotlight on me? Are people looking at me? Like, I felt crazy because it was so intense and so loud. And so like I was alone. And that's when I look back, you know, when you write a book, you really realize the like arc of years and things. I was like, oh, that's because that's how I felt about him at the time. And then later on, after the day we had that great lunch in Seattle, I saw him play that night. And I was like, man, this song is so good. Look at how happy here everyone is. Look what he's doing to these people. This is incredible. And then I saw him a year later and he kind of blew me off that night. And it's in the book, but I'm watching it and I'm like, we're playing this song too fast. The groove's not right. I don't like this venue. Like it really, I mean, so the music is really like, it really had, but I never thought about it at the time until I wrote a book and realized that in these scenes, I was like, oh, this is crazy. I like the song here because things are good. I hate the song here because things are bad. It's a really interesting thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not awesome.
No, you learn a lot about yourself. But to your question, I mean,
interesting.
So much therapy, so much reflection. And I do think it's like the way I started writing the book, I wasn't trying to write a book. I was just writing a lot for fun. And I was telling stories about the bands I was in and the record store. My wife said, she's like, look, you need to write about your father and your race. That's the real stuff.
Right.
And I remember thinking like, but I don't know, what can I write about my father? I've only met him a few times, only once really when we had lunch. And so I just started writing about it. I wrote about that lunch and I wrote about other times. I wrote about the time hearing the song in the movie theater. I just wrote these little stories. And then I realized like, oh, but I could also write about not meeting him, but hearing a song somewhere or somebody asking me if I'm related to him. And so once I kept like adding, and suddenly I had 40 years worth of little stories. And that's when I realized like, oh, whoa, I wonder if I could make this into a book.
Yeah.
So like getting into all of it made me, you know, not only remember things, but, you know, I asked my mother so much and my uncle and got so many stories from people.
Besides more interviews and um, more talking about yourself. How has your life changed since the book? Internally, maybe, or
Yeah.
other people may see you, anything like that? I
I
don't know.
think interestingly, strangely, because as you mentioned, so much talking about myself, more than I ever have done. But I think I've become a much better listener as a result, which is interesting because I get so many people. I've done a lot of, I've probably done 60 or 70 in-person events, like readings and things at bookstores and colleges. And a lot of people come up to me afterwards. I also get like a lot of emails and Facebook messages, but even in person and just say like, I grew up without my father. I have a similar story, and I love listening to those stories.
Yeah.
And I've learned so much, and it's also just fascinating to hear what piece of my story that someone picks out that they identify with. But I wasn't expecting to be hearing so many other people's stories as a result of telling mine, and that's been really enlightening and fascinating, and just like also opened my eyes to the fact that not everyone has a normal life out there. There's
Right.
lots and lots of weird versions of similar
There's
things, and
no
I, and
such
I, I think
thing.
I attract those people, and I love
That's
that.
awesome. And there's really no such thing as normal. On your way to who you are, to this new expression of artistry. Before the book was 4 AD,
Mm.
right? And listen, I've only because I've heard so much about it already. There is 100,000 different interviews, people that you can go to and find out a lot more about all of 4 AD.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not going to do it here. I hope you guys aren't mad about that. What I do want to do here is see if there's something like you can give, because I think you have an insight um, to a few very specific issues going on in the music industry right now that may help. Because you're the only person that I know of who was selling cassette tapes, owned a business where you sold vinyl,
Right. Right.
and run a business where you sell streams today.
And cassette tapes and vinyl.
And cassette tapes and vinyl.
Yeah.
That is unique. That has a perspective that you haven't explored. Explore that with.
I mean, it's the way I get sort of a lot of questions. This is more like, I don't know, cocktail party questions, like not people in the music industry, but people who are, normal people who will say like, wow, it must be a crazy time, or is it a really hard time in the music industry? I've heard streaming and all these things. And my thing is always my response, but it's true. It's that it's in a way it hasn't changed at all. My job now, or the record company's job, is to find people who we like, who make music that we like, figure out a way to work with them, which usually means giving them some money up front and some sort of commitment to help them record their music and help put it out into the world, and then do that and hopefully have people who are good at doing it, and that's kind of it. And that hasn't changed in the 100+ years of recorded music, and it's always been changing. The CD was a crazy thing. That was a huge threat. People hated the CD because they had to resize their bins in record stores. There's always been an aversion to the new format, especially when it's popular. So streaming right now, of course, the money's not great, and that's a real issue. But other than that, it's just another thing. Napster scared the shit out of people. Cassettes scared people. I mean, the real history is if you go way back when, once recorded music became a thing, all the music stores before that sold sheet music. They didn't want records out there because it was going to completely kill their business. So there's always been some crazy change. Right now it's streams, but that's also what keeps it exciting. People want to listen to music. They want to connect with and identify with the people who make it. They want to go see them. They want to buy their shirts. They want to be them. And all of that has always existed. And in a way, it's never been more accessible than it is now. It's really exciting.
Wow. And that is the exact perspective I guess you would expect, is not how it's different, but how it's the same.
Right.
It's how it's the same.
Well, I mean, you just can't spend time, or a lot of time, harking on the past and wishing things were the way they were. You just have to figure out how to adapt and how to make it work.
So in the adaptation, um, before you had a tape that you were selling, you had a cover art, and you had this and that. Um, the idea for someone leaving college now or just starting a garage band was, I'm going to record something and I'm going to get it to somebody who can do something with it, right? I have a feeling, and you let me know if I'm right or wrong, that that no longer is the case. But maybe the touring and the playing live is something that has taken the place of handing out CDs and trying to visit managers. Is that
Right, right. I think it all still happens. And, I work for a huge independent label, but the major labels still exist. There's much smaller labels. There's so many different versions of the record company. So I definitely can't speak for all of them. But in my world, to your point, I think the sort of in this whatever TikTok, YouTube, Instagram world where everyone can be everywhere all the time, I think it's never been more important than now to actually physically be there and to go play music for the people, to sell them a thing, play for 10 people, play for 20 people. And it takes energy, it takes time, it takes commitment, it takes money and all those things. And if you can't do it, that's okay. I understand. But somebody else will do it. And that person who plays 200 shows this year is going to get a lot better at it than the person who doesn't. And that's the advantage. And that's the one thing you have control over.
You said when you get there, sell something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Or give something away, whatever. Something. Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's definitely, it's a much harder road. I mean, so you're going to book those shows yourself, you're going to email people. I mean, it's a lot of work.
Right. Okay. Okay. So, and that's a sentiment that is very well known in the industry. Before you can even, before you even think about that stuff, have you put in the work? Have you done the 200 shows? But I think now it's even maybe more important than getting a manager, would you say, is doing these shows is probably a faster way to get noticed than getting a manager without the shows.
Probably. I mean, I don't know if it's faster, but it's more, it will lead to a longer career, I think. I think it's possible. I mean, look, everyone can point to someone who played 0 shows, wrote 1 song, got it on TikTok, and got $1 million deal with a major label.
Yeah. The one in a million is that if that's
right, but it can happen, and so that's why isn't that a much more attractive road than I'm going to go tough it out and play 200 shows for 10 people every night? I mean, of course it is, but band B is going to get a lot better and is going to be around in 10 years.
Facts. There it is. There it is, people. All right, 2 more things. You found I said this before, the music adjacent path. When you weren't able to play drums, and you weren't able to be in this band, or it didn't go the way you wanted, you owned a record label. What is that like? You said that their partner now kind of took majority stake, but then
the store, you mean the record store?
Itself.
Yeah,
The record store. Yep.
Yeah.
No, 2 questions. Talk about finding the music adjacent path. Instead of being an insurance agent, I want to talk about the music, whatever you have to say about that, whatever you can think of about that. And number 2, specifically, what was it like running a very popular music store, like actually selling music store in Seattle at the time when that was the thing, like Nirvana, Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots, the grunge era. Talk about one, then the other.
Okay, the music adjacent, that's an interesting way to put it. So not being a musician, but working in music, or working around music. I mean, and I was trying to just do it all at once. And so I knew that the store, getting a job at a record store first as the music adjacent did all of that. That's where I met the people from the labels and the people in the bands and everyone involved. And so that worked for me. And I think that was a different time because the record store still, I do believe, is the cultural center in a lot of communities, in a lot of cities. It's not just where you buy and sell records, it's where people who love music and know about it gather to exchange ideas and to talk about it and to share it and to play it. And so it's much more than just like, can I buy this? You can do that. anywhere online, but it's more going to discover something and have conversations. So that used to be an even bigger thing because I was doing it before the internet, basically. So it really only existed there and in venues and other places. But I mean, there's so many other music adjacent things. There's, of course, there's venues. There's so many great venues across the country, and that's if live music is your thing and you want to end up being in the booking world or maybe a manager, like that's a great place to get into that, is to work at a club where you'll meet 3 bands every night and meet all the booking agents, all of those things. I think to me, it's all about putting yourself someplace where you're going to meet people that you might want to work with in the future. So that's a big part of the music adjacent. So something public-ish at least makes sense to me, like the record store or the venue, someplace people go to do the thing that you're interested in doing.
It occurs to me that the way you speak about it is so, as a matter of factly, might be because your mother was also the one who taught you how to stand outside the door for 4 hours to meet the band. I'm going to tell you something. I never thought of it.
Right.
I say, how did they meet the band? What do you mean you met the band? It never, ever in my life occurred to me I could just stay there.
Right.
Or I could stand next to the bus and see if they pass by. It never occurred. And I would say to a good percentage of people, we see a barrier there where there's not. Right? And the capacity, the idea of being able to move, to go out over that invisible barrier and stand over there instead of over here, is a gift or something that's taught. And maybe it was taught. Maybe it was something that you learned.
Yeah, so, definitely, I think one lesson I'm not as good at this as my mother is, but I've gotten better at it, is to it's not to necessarily be pushy or obnoxious, but it's just it's to ask for things and ask for help. I mean, the thing she would do is I would be 10 years old, and so she was 32 or something. This happened with the band Def Leppard. This is in the book, but I wanted to meet them. And so, and again, it was easy because I was a kid and she was a mom, so we didn't look like normal, like rock star fans.
Right,
there were lots of, people in leather in their 20s that were getting kind of kicked away, but we just sort of stood there and were invisible. And Def Leppard got out of his van, and I remember saying, "That's the drummer," pointing to him, Rick Allen. And my mother just walked right up to him and said, "Hey, Rick, my son's a drummer. Will you talk to him?" And he was like, "Sure." And we hung out for not long, 3 minutes backstage when we talked. I remember that really well. I remember he's a really nice guy. And, you can do that. And the worst thing that happens is no. And what's so wrong with that?
That's so that's the mom for you. Parenting. Are you ever thinking of becoming a father?
I am thinking of becoming a father, yes.
Okay, awesome. Exclusive people. I'll see you in 9 months, I'm playing. So you are thinking of it. Because I think you have a lot to pass on.
Thank you.
Knowledge-wise.
The question I get all the time at book events is, has your relationship with your father or non-relationship with your father affected how you feel about having children? That's a different one for me, because I think still, even at the end of an hour-long book interview, I feel like what people are asking me is, since your father was a bad father, what kind of father do you think you'll be? And I always get defensive, and I'm like, no one ever said anyone was a bad father in this last hour.
Yeah, I wasn't going to ask.
I don't have any history with a bad father. I have really good father figures that are better than,
I see, and that's another thing. You did say people, put their own stuff on there. After reading your book, I would say, after seeing the type of mother your mother was,
right.
Are you excited to become a father?
That's a much better question. Yeah, sounds fun. I mean, be easier at 22 than 52 or whatever I'll be. But,
so
it's cool. I'm eating a kale salad. It's all good.
I am not. I'm not. I'm not eating kale salad. And my son is 5 and I'm 45. So I started over. My 2 daughters are in college. No, I'm sorry. My first daughter is graduating in about 6 months. And she's becoming a teacher. She's awesome. She's a teacher like me. And my other daughter is almost there. So they're old. They're out of here. They're gone. Yeah. And I started over. So
nice.
A 5-year-old is playing drums. to Warbox. I'm loving it. Yeah, man. This was absolutely amazing. My friend, Nabil Ayers, the man, the son, the brother, the husband. How's your wife?
She's great. I think she's probably maybe making cocktails right now here in Palm Springs.
Really?
Yeah.
After
She's a
disaster cocktails. I love it.
financial planner, so totally different business as a financial planner, but started as a music writer, so we have a lot in common.
Okay. So she has artistic as well.
Yeah.
She didn't choose to go music adjacent.
She's actually dancing in the window right now too.
Hey, I want to hear it. Come on.
She's trying to distract me.
Come on in. It's too late
She was
now.
seriously just asking about you. Now you're going to end up on this podcast 2.5 hours.
Great.
Have an earphone. This is AJ.
Hi.
AJ, how are you?
What's going on, Doug?
Hey. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
How does it feel to be married to someone who's been selling music since they were cassette tapes all the way till they've become a stream?
It feels very special, and he knows more about music than anyone I've ever met. And I used to edit music books for a living, so he's the real deal.
He was telling me that you did that. If you had to compare your happiness level doing that as opposed to what you do now.
Ooh, good question. Different happiness muscles, I would say. Greater day-to-day, happier now, advising people and getting them to financial freedom. I would say writing about music, great joy because it's art. So totally different muscles to scratch or to work.
Wow. What was your first reaction after reading his book, My Life in the Sunshine?
I remember what it was.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember?
Yes.
You want me to tell?
He got the date of our wedding wrong.
Oh, I was thinking second reaction then. The second reaction was that you weren't in it enough, was you?
That's not what I said.
I did get the wedding date wrong. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. First reaction was you got the wedding date wrong. What's the next reaction?
I think that I was surprised by certain people that were not in the book. Actually, I was thinking of other people, not myself.
Okay.
But yeah, I love the book. I love the book from very early on. But I was not very involved in the...
It was super secret.
Yeah, very secret.
But it was her idea, sort of, without meaning for it to be.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't know that by every single interview I've ever seen, including this one, he finds a way to mention that you were the one to tell him what to write about. And I find that very intentional and very awesome as a husband. But okay, so that's it. That's all I wanted. That was super. I got a little extra in there. My friend, thank you so much.
We had a really good time.
I'm really glad about it. I feel like if you have no idea how much stuff I'm skipping and going over, so if I felt like I was rambling,
no way, it's great.
It was like that. I'd love to continue talking to you at some point.
Yeah, let's. I was in Atlanta actually in February or March I did a thing at Criminal Records, a book thing there. It was really fun.
You've been to Criminal Records?
But I'll end up back down there. I'll let you up.
Please do. Come by the studio, man. We'll have a great time and hang out, listen to some good music. And I got 2 drum sets.
Perfect.
That's what I'm saying. Oh, man. What a pleasure. Thank you so much. To the person who's leaving right now after watching this, they only have a few months left until they graduate, or the person who's just going into a music education class for the first time, watching this for some comic relief and hoping to get something out of it. What is your last message? What do you have to say? What's your advice? What do you have to give?
I think it's important that in music or in any sort of creative field to just keep doing what you do because you like doing it. I got a lot of people, bands or artists, to say, "Will you listen to my music and give me some advice?" And I think, I can never say like, "Oh, turn the guitars up" or double the chorus or whatever. It doesn't matter what I think. Everyone has an opinion. Mine is no better or worse than anyone else's. I usually come back and say, "Do you love what you're doing and do you believe in it?" Wow. And if they say yes, then it's like, then keep doing it and get better at it, and you don't need that kind of advice. You just need to work hard. And obviously luck is always a factor, but you can do things to put yourself in a position to benefit from the luck if you get it.
How can you judge if you're getting better, honestly?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess when I was in bands, it was always like, wow, listen to that live version, that recording we heard from last night versus the album. We're so much tighter, we're so much better, the vocals sound better. That was usually the way I could tell. That's one way. I don't know. I mean,
I'll take a certain, because you're easily able to trick yourself, though, right? So, are there any best practices, any things that you do to ensure that you're not telling yourself like you look at America's Greatest Idol, whatever, American Idol, whatever it is. I don't watch that stuff, but when you hear some people singing, it's like, were you honest with yourself when you came there? Like how were you able to convince yourself? How do you avoid that? Is there a way to avoid that? You might not have an answer for that.
I think it's important to have someone to sort of bounce stuff off of. I have 3 different friends who are all writers in different way than I am, but like sometimes I'll get a text, I'll be like, hey, can you read a quick thing I wrote? And my friend will send it to me, and I'll just be like, this makes sense, this is too long, make this part at the beginning, have like this rhythm. And likewise, people do that for me, and it's cool to have, I guess I would call it a community, and no matter what you're doing, someone who you can bounce things off of, who you trust, who knows your work, who can say, sometimes it's something really simple, like this sentence that's here in the middle, that should be the intro. That's it, and that'll change the whole thing. Like, I think that's really important.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great drummer, successful and insightful author, music executive, and now an educator on the MC's channel.
All right. Thank you for having me. This has been a blast.
Man, thank you so much for coming. It means a lot to me, Nabil. Nabil Ayers, everyone. Check out that book. You will not regret it. If you're like me, I'm dyslexic, so reading is tough. I got it from audible.com.
Oh, you're the audio book.
Right? So I read a lot of books now because I realized that I've been missing out. And Audible helps me learn and read Du Bois and Baldwin, like we were talking about, and all the things I've been missing out because I was too afraid to read. Go to Audible. Get this book. It won't change your life. Maybe it will, but it will enhance it for sure. For sure. If you're a musician, for sure. But if you're a person living on this earth who has experiences unlike other people, I think that's all of us. I think we agreed. We all have a separate experience. This will enhance your life for sure. I thank you. And I encourage all of you to go do it. Go read it. Hardback, softback, Audible, whatever the heck it is, Amazon, do what you got to do. I don't know where every other place it is.
All those places.
Nabil, you're the man, and I want you to get in touch with me when you get to Atlanta.
I will. Thank you so much, Doug. Hit me if you're in New York.
I will, for sure.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Have a good one.